Sapien.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Sapien Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Gary Shlifer. What's up, buddy?
What's up, Brian? I am so happy to be here today, as usual. We have my good friend, my dentist, and one of the gentlemen I've learned so much from, Dr. Gabe Adorjan. Dr. Gabe is a dentist. I consider him a holistic dentist. I don't know if you do, Gabe has taught me so much about dental health, sleep apnea, supplementation. We work together here in Los Angeles, California, with our clinics. His clinic is called Modern American Dentistry. And Gabe, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, guys.
Absolutely. There's so much more to dental health than just going to the dentist, right? So we're going to get into all that. It's amazing that I didn't know about this before I read Physical Degeneration, Weston A. Price.
Yeah, I mean, I think I didn't have any real... I went through all of med school and had no idea who Weston A. Price was. And it wasn't until Gabe and his partner, Joel, Dr. Joel Gould, came to me and sort of started educating me about so much of this ancestral health stuff. And to come from dentists was a little bit, it's very surprising, I guess. And then I went into this world of reading books and podcasts, and this was like 4 or 5 years ago. And I realized that actually it was a dentist that first brought to light so much of the ancestral thinking that drives my practice now. I guess a good place to start, where did you come? Where did you find ancestral health? Where did you find this concept? Did it come from Weston A. Price?
It's quite interesting, actually. I think dentists that have been enlightened, so to say, can, the issue with medicine and physicians, as you know, is you guys receive so much education that people can often have a very hard time thinking outside of the box and being introduced to new concepts. As a dentist, we obviously receive physiology, neurology, all the kind of similar things as you guys. We don't get into as deep a level on lots of the stuff, medications, obviously.
Pharmaceuticals,
things like that. But we have enough of an education in how the body works to understand. And then when you're introduced to new concepts, you don't have that education, so to say, that you guys receive.
Kind of the dogma
exactly.
Concepts,
that may prevent a physician from being open to new concepts. And which is why I have just the utmost respect for you and Sapien and everything you guys do, because you're so different from the average physician. You are the definition of being open to new concepts. So where this all came about was Joel and I went to, as dentists, we treat sleep apnea. There's two ways to treat sleep apnea: is the gas mask, the machine,
the
CPAP, and an oral appliance. And we can get into the details. But so we went to take a course just to learn how to really treat sleep apnea. And it was a 2-day course. We were there overnight. And the guy at the end of the first day said, well, I have 5 home sleep testers. Who wants a sleep test? And we were sitting in the front row. Both Joel and I don't really sleep well. So we were just all over taking a sleep test. And, we still kind of had the preconceived notion that, you have to be overweight or these things that
obese,
people think of, as... So, somebody fit and thin wouldn't necessarily think that they had sleep apnea. So, of course, we were both shocked that we both had sleep apnea, both Joel and I.
Yeah.
And, pretty moderate. It wasn't severe, but it was definitely substantial enough. And at that point, I had a 5 or 6 month old. So I never was a great sleeper in my whole life. And then once I had a kid, it was just I was becoming symptomatic, so to say. Not just needed extra coffee, but I was starting to,
That daytime sleepiness.
some depression, some grinding, some jaw pain. All these things started popping up when I went from sleep apnea sleep to now a baby waking me up 6 times a night. And so really my passion for sleep came from an effort to treat myself and get better. And, obviously you go down this road, you kind of, so to say, go down the rabbit hole, and you just start discovering all these new things because there's so much information out there, and it's quite fascinating. But that's kind of what led me on this journey of similar thinking as you guys and what you guys are all doing.
Do you consider yourself a holistic dentist?
I do not.
Yeah,
and the reason I do not. Holistic dentistry is kind of, for dentists, a dirty word, because holistic dentists, they do some, they market to a very specific populace, and there's, I would say some kind of BS stuff going on there. And I don't really, so dentistry has created a holistic dentist, and I don't really practice that way, but I am all for wellness. The mouth is like a window to your health.
Yes.
There's so many things that you can see. And what people don't realize is really the linking factor is the vitamin D. Now most physicians, most people know there's a link between periodontal disease and heart disease, right? They find some of the same bugs, some of the same bacteria, but the linking factor between, diabetes, heart disease, sleep apnea, all of these things is that they're all caused by vitamin D deficiency, then leading to poor sleep, then leading to physiologic degeneration, and it just continues because your sleep, everything continues to get worse. If you deprive any animal of sleep, they will get sick and die eventually. So just the person continues to degenerate, and most physicians are not trained in sleep. There's not very much sleep education in medical school.
Most physicians are not even trained in the concept of vitamin D as a critical player in your health.
Yep. So, and part of that is, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of the curriculum in medical school is set forth by Big Pharma, correct?
I mean, the top 10, contributors to public medical school funding are all big food companies, actually. Can't be Big Pharma. I think that would be too obvious if like drug companies are throwing money at medical schools.
Well,
I think people would say,
Well, don't they fund some of the research, some of the stuff that goes
they
on?
fund the majority of the research that we talk about anyway. Like all these double-blind placebo-controlled studies can only...
Exactly.
But I'm talking about specifically the medical education is funded by big food. And Dr. Tro is a great guy in this space, and he has this great slide in one of his presentations where he just points, he pulled the research, and it's the top 10, even more, are all big food companies paying these schools. So that I was actually thinking about this the other day, like, why don't they talk about, why did I not have a course on metabolic health? Like, I think of myself as a metabolic health doctor now. Like, I'm still learning every day about it, but I know so much more than my colleagues because I'm hungry to understand it. And there's not a course, they don't talk about metabolic health. That term came after medical training, after residency even. I did internal medicine residency, they didn't talk about it. And I think that's because if you let that cat out of the bag, if you let people start talking about metabolic health, the wheels come off, the grain industry, the anti-meat propaganda. Like, you can't understand metabolic health and promote a standard American diet or the food pyramid. It's impossible. And then the vitamin D stuff, if you get to a root cause problem, like you're saying, oh man, vitamin D deficiency is a root cause problem of sleep issues, dental health. We can talk about mood issues, gut health. I mean, vitamin D is, I just saw a great thing by Dr. Rhonda Patrick talking about there's vitamin D receptors in your testes, and vitamin D health actually drives testosterone production, brain health, all this stuff. If you let that cat out of the bag, what happens to the pharmaceutical industry? What happens to the current kind of a way we treat people? It falls apart. It falls apart quickly, just like it did for me.
Yeah.
And I restructured my whole practice.
Yeah.
So that's what I think is going on. And again, not like a conspiracy, just like the way things are.
Yeah. Well, there's also no money to be made in people being healthy. So
Yeah.
Ouch.
Well, that's what this is like.
There
The
is
theme of our
sad
podcast.
there is.
It's like what comes up every podcast is that sentiment and Weston Price. That's like the thing we'll talk about every time.
And why I think it's important to have Dr. Gabe on the podcast for people to understand, hey, Dr. Gabe as a dentist is looking in people's mouths. And okay, you're not holistic. I like the term integrative dentist.
Functional or integrated?
Functional.
Wellness, whatever.
I don't like
no.
that. I like integrative. Here's the reason.
Okay.
You're integrating. What are you integrating? You are integrating everything you got taught from the standard dental practice and concepts across a plethora of different fields.
I like
everything from ancestral health, from thoughtful supplementation. We talk about even like development, childhood development, and how vitamin D plays a role in that and develops your jaw structure, which I'd love to talk about later in this podcast. But that's the integrative component. So when you're looking in someone's mouth, you're not just thinking, oh, that's a cavity. Oh, like whatever, the linings are inflamed of the teeth. Mm-hmm. No, you're thinking about how did this person were they raised in a vitamin D deficiency? Have they been eating this processed grain diet and breaking their teeth down and their gums down? That integration is where I think you set yourself apart from all the other dentists I've been talking to. And I want people to realize that, the dentist has this view into people's world that no one else has. And like you said, it's this window into your soul in a way, into your health soul.
Tell us how that is, how the teeth are the window to your health.
For one, periodontal health. Okay, we'll start with that. The gums. So, when the person is in a chronic inflammatory state, which can be from grains, vitamin D deficiency, bad bacteria thriving, poor immune support. So the periodontal disease being able to take over and is for those reasons. So that's one. Wear on the teeth, when people grind, when they have issues with their sleep, when someone has airway obstruction and they're not breathing clearly, freely. Any airway sound. A person doesn't necessarily have to snore. You could just, if you hear them sleeping and they're audible, meaning their airways making a sound, there is some restriction. When the body has to fight to draw the air in, there are what's called arousals and microarousals to the brain. So there's a flight or fight response. The milliseconds after the stimulus to the brain, to the flight or fight response, your chewing muscles activate and you grind. So people destroy their teeth due to poor sleep, due to grinding. The body being in a chronic state of flight or fight spills over onto the daytime. Doesn't go away when you wake up. So people feel at unease, they feel anxious, they get depression, they get mental health issues from poor sleep. All this I can tell by looking at, gums, teeth, tongue depressors say, look at the back of the throat. You see a beat up, elongated uvula, it's because it's flapping around the whole night. So the back of the throat being red is because the person has airway obstruction. Enlarged tonsils, people still have their tonsils. Chronic inflammatory, low vitamin D. It's a lymph node, right? So your body responds. The tonsils on their own can occlude and block the airway. So all these things, scalloped tongue, when people have poor sleep, the same way as my appliance opens the airway, people tongue thrust and push their tongue forward because it pulls the tongue off the back of the throat. So what happens is the tongue, one, you're using the tongue a lot, so it gets bigger, doesn't fit in the mouth, as the person is thrusting their tongue forward, literally you can see imprintation of the teeth. That's what the scalloping is. It's the shape of the teeth leaving a mark in the tongue. So you can look at someone's tongue and you see like a ribbed appearance on the outside. It's from poor sleep and tongue thrusting. Something called a geographic tongue. So sometimes, I'm sure you've seen, when you look at someone's mouth, you see these yellow, red lesions on the tongue. That is B vitamin deficiency. One of the first places that it shows is the tongue. So when someone's severely deficient in B vitamins and vitamin D, B vitamins are made by your microbiome, your gut. You can see these appearances on the tongue. All these little telltale signs that.
What about the palate? That was interesting.
Yes,
Yeah.
palate. So the palate is the roof. The roof of the mouth is the floor of the nose. So when someone has poor arch development, you can get what's called a vaulted palate. So instead of being a nice dome shape, it goes up to a sharp peak in the middle. What that does is it scrunches up the septum. So in essence, the vaulted palate can cause a deviated septum. It can also just cause a small nasal cavity and cause difficulty breathing through the nose. So yes, vaulted palate is another thing that.
And we know how important it is, nasal breathing.
Absolutely.
So powerful,
Yep.
releases nitrous oxide, and just
Yep.
really, really good for your body.
Yep. So there's lots of little telltale signs that we see in the mouth that can indicate a person has other things going on, other health issues, deficiencies.
Well, in a big way, if people, I know I've had a lot of vegans on my show, and they lose their teeth or they have just real bad deficiencies in the fat soluble vitamins. And so that's something you can see as well. But that's like a big. I don't even know if you've seen like.
I've never. That's never been on my radar. That's quite interesting. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is some Western price stuff too, right? So vitamin A, D, E, and K, and just having enough fat soluble vitamins, and just if you could just look it up, look up Google vegans, teeth, falling out, tooth decay, and because they have such a severe deficiency, they just have major problems, and I've seen. Even back home in Hawaii, this guy's trying to raise his kid vegan. The kid has like no teeth. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. I learned something today.
Yeah. Well, Brian knows all about the downfalls of the vegan diet.
Yeah.
I didn't know it affected teeth though.
Oh
yeah.
Yeah, it's bad. Really quick, I think this is an important question. Like, tell us the direct link between like vitamin D deficiency and sleep. The mechanism that you understand, and even you've explained this to me before, and I thought this was so fascinating, and it really changed my life because I started supplementing with B100. How that B100 can also help with your sleep at night. Because just a quick story, I always thought I slept great. I still do. I sleep better now. I went and saw Dr. Gabe. He's my dentist. He noticed, hey Gary, got a little grinding. Kind of did some tests, and you're like, your vitamin D is great, but maybe you're missing some of your B vitamins, despite me eating a very, very high animal food diet. Started supplementing B100 before bed, like you suggested. Oh my God. I mean, I don't use the monitors I'd love to have, because I know the data would have been powerful, but I can just tell my sleep quality is so much better. My wife, she notices that I don't have an audible sleeping anymore. So I used to, again, not snore, just like
audible.
She could hear me sleeping. She can't hear me sleeping anymore. And more interestingly, I started dreaming again. Like I used to dream like every once in a while. Started B100 and I am dreaming and I wake up and I am like well rested. It's been a powerful change. I'd love for you to like explain that mechanism, because that was very, very interesting.
So vitamin D, you get from the sun, not from your diet. If you eat ancestral diet, you can, bone marrow, organ meats. There are some things that have vitamin D, but your body was never really designed to get its vitamin D from food. Depending on what part of the country, what part of the world you live in, Some, your diet can help in areas of vitamin D deficiency, but really your body was designed to get vitamin D from the sun. Vitamin D, there's vitamin D receptors everywhere in the body, everywhere, including the nucleus of every cell. Vitamin D plays a role in DNA being unwound and copied. In both cells being copied and enzymes being made through RNA, DNA plays a role in that. There are certain systems in the body that have a higher metabolic demand for vitamin D, such as B cells and T cells, your immune system. One of the things that severe vitamin D deficiency leads to is autoimmune disease. There are lots and lots of published studies and evidence linking the two together, allergies, things like that. It also acts on part of your brainstem. So when someone sleeps, your body's supposed to be paralyzed, so you don't act out your dreams. There's a sleep switch, so to say, that that shuts down your skeletal muscles. You still make saliva, you still have to breathe, so your airway, your breathing and swallowing muscles, diaphragm, intercostal muscles, things like that, they have to stay active. So there are, I believe, 3 nuclei in the brainstem that are responsible for body paralysis. 2 of them are devoted to respiratory, breathing and swallowing. One of them is skeletal. So what happens is when you're low in vitamin D, your brainstem is not sending out the correct signals. So people with sleep apnea can relate. Restless leg syndrome is primarily caused by sleep apnea. And it spills over onto the daytime. Some people do it while they're sleeping. They toss and turn, they move around, they can't be still, they're all over the place, they wake up. This used to be my dad. They wake up in the morning and their sheets are like in a knot because they're just all over the whole night. So that comes from that sleep switch not working. You're constantly having arousals that knock you out of the deeper stage of sleep into lighter sleep. You move, all these things. So it comes from the sleep being fragmented. So the same way, in an extreme example, it's called REM behavior disorder. People sleepwalk. So that sleep switch is completely broken and you're literally acting out your dreams. So instead of your brain keeping your body paralyzed, it's not. And you're able to just act out your dreams. So the body paralysis component is not there. So your breathing muscles are not supposed to get paralyzed. So on the flip side, when you're deficient, your brainstem is not sending out the correct signal, your breathing muscles do get paralyzed. They get relaxed. They fall asleep, and you get airway obstruction. So if you think about, obviously there's more relaxation during sleep, right? There's just lowered muscle tone in general. But if you're able to breathe during the day, and they say, the common school of thought is, yeah, it's a structural issue, your jaw is too small, you're too fat, blah, blah, blah. But I had a big overbite and a small lower jaw, and I didn't snore in my 20s, and then my jaw didn't change. Then in my 30s, I started snoring. So there is a difference in what your brain is telling your body to do. And if you're able to breathe during the day,
You should breathe at night.
and you can at night, it's because of the signals that are being sent to the muscle. So that's where the vitamin D comes into play. And it's so fascinating. If you have an adult that has sleep apnea, unfortunately, the vitamin D will help. If you have somebody really healthy like you, you can usually just do some supplementation and fix the problem. There are some kids that snore and grind their teeth. It starts at a very early age. And what's fascinating is if you take a little kid, 2, 3, grinds or snores, and you give them vitamin D, it pretty much immediately goes away. Within weeks, they stop. And I've had people in my life that try to get help from physicians and doctors, and nobody knows what to do for a 2-year-old that grinds or snores. What are you supposed to do? They don't know. And vitamin D is it's amazing what it does for kids because it fixes the problem just like magic. So that's what one part of the what vitamin D does.
So it's a hormone signal.
It's a hormone.
To your nuclei, to your nervous system,
Yeah.
to function in an appropriate way, so that you can sleep.
So also, your gut bacteria. Your gut bacteria, to be healthy, need vitamin D. Vitamin D is what triggered hibernation in animals. So when the sun went away, it actually changed your gut bacteria and your microflora.
Talk about the time of year when it went away.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Like
So
at the end of fall.
yeah, so and what purpose that served is that it's hunting and gathering mode during the summertime, and it's hibernation mode, power saving mode during the wintertime. So when the sun went away and there was snow and it was cold and people were sleeping in a cave or whatever they did, you had to conserve energy. You couldn't have your physiology functioning in the same way as summertime when you're killing animals and you're eating stuff and there's fruits and vegetables and animals and you can pick from what to eat. Wintertime was very different. So the sun going away actually changed your bacteria and your biology so that you can make it through winter. So people that have low vitamin D and they stay out of the sun, their body's stuck in permanent winter. And metabolic syndrome is really people that do not respond and they can't get better. It's because your body thinks it's winter. It's trying to keep you alive. It's trying to hoard the fat. It's trying to conserve the energy. It doesn't want you to die. So the sun going away actually is what ushered and brought on this change. So your gut bacteria make your B vitamins. But they need vitamin D to be healthy and to survive. So you can take all the probiotics in the world. Your gut bacteria will never be healthy if you do not take vitamin D or you do not get sun or do not have adequate levels of vitamin D. Your B vitamins play a huge role in sleep. They are part of the Krebs cycle. So the Krebs cycle is basically going on everywhere in your body. It affects every system, right? So the reason the B vitamins helped you sleep is because you were running out of B vitamins when you went to sleep. Your body went into repair mode, right? Your pituitary was releasing hormones. There's all these things that were going on that are using the Krebs cycle. They're using up the B vitamins. There's sun exposure uses B vitamins, making vitamin D. Exercise uses B vitamins. Acute stress. All these things use B vitamins. So the average person that doesn't go in the sun, has poor gut health, they need to supplement. And the B vitamins, it's fascinating how big of a role the different B vitamins. If you just look up B vitamin deficiency symptoms, it covers everything that's wrong with everybody, everything. And these are the reasons why. So even B5 pantothenic acid is the substrate for coenzyme A, which makes acetylcholine, which is the neurotransmitter of the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's just one thing, but it's the B vitamins and the vitamin D are absolutely crucial for restoring someone's sleep when they've been broken.
Wow.
This is great. Yeah. And the B vitamins are from animal foods. They're from red meat. But like you said, a lot of people either don't have enough of them, they're not eating enough of these foods. Or maybe if you are even eating enough of the foods, your gut microbiome could be off, or you could still be eating more, or you need to, kind of bump it up.
Well, so the thing is that what you have to look at is maintenance and repair, right? Someone that's sick and broken and they need to repair. So if you know you've always eaten an ancestral diet and you've always done these things, your body can be healthy off of a maintenance dose, so to say. But if you're broken, your body needs to go through repair. That happens during sleep. You don't sleep, you don't repair, and you don't get better. You can with drugs and medication, but that's just covering the symptom. It's not really getting you better. So if you want your body to heal and you want to get healthier and better, it only happens while you're sleeping. And if you're missing these fundamental elements, you're not going to be sleeping well and doing repair. And you will just continue to break down and, symptoms pop up in usually the 30s and the 40s. Usually people can kind of manage until then, and then things start to pop up where they start needing medication and this and that.
And I find that, like if I have a good flow to my life and I'm not being overworked and I'm able to do all my acute stressors, my HIIT workouts, my deep breathing, I'm eating super clean, I don't notice the supplementation as much because
exactly.
my body's just, it's crushing. More lately, business has really picked up, and I got married recently. It was just a lot of stuff. And I can just feel, I hadn't put in the effort into the self-care. There wasn't the time. And I was really starting to feel it. I cranked up my supplementation. I kind of processed all the stuff we do. And immediately, like literally the next day, I started feeling better. My sleep got dialed in. And I'm like, look, if I can't do all this other stuff, all my lifestyle stuff, at least transiently, I can supplement. And I think that's where that's what's something I've learned recently over these last few years is that it's not about being dogmatic about supplementation. We talked about it in a different podcast. It's not about being like, oh my God, you have to take this every day. It's like a pharmaceutical. You got to take this vitamin D
or the opposite. Or like we're like whole food people and it's like, oh man, you can't take supplements. We're whole food people. Like you're a dummy.
Yeah, never take a vitamin D. It's got to be a liver pill. It's got to be from like a cat. Like you got to take the right good quality stuff and you got to be thoughtful about what's going on. I guess the thing that keeps coming back when I think about this is that no one lives, and not in 2021, in America, in a city, like no one lives this consistent life of like following the seasons and eating locally. But like it's a little bit of a fantasy. It's an idea we all strive for.
Yeah, being out in the sun all day. Every day.
Like the reality is you have weeks or months where you're crushing. You're waking up early to hit the gym. You're, getting in the sun in the middle of the day. You're going to your farmer's market to get the highest quality stuff. And then you have months where you got to take care of the kids. You gotta hit the commitment to work because people need you there. And some of this stuff falls away. And that's where these ideas about understanding the physiology, understanding what's happening to you when you're falling asleep and when you're waking up, and ancestral hacking your way through it.
Ancestral hacking.
There you go.
Well, a lot of people have questions about this, about vitamin D supplementation, because it's probably necessary in a lot of people. And then can you tell us about maintenance versus active recovery dose?
So it's a fat-soluble hormone, not a vitamin. And most people need 5,000 to 10,000 units a day.
And the recommended daily
is 6 to 800. 6 to 800. No,
it's laughable.
Yeah,
it's a joke.
So part of the problem, and now they're slowly converting the unit of measurement, but part of the problem was you tell anybody to take 10,000 of anything. It doesn't matter what's after. Nobody understands what an IU is.
Right.
But 5,000 IU is 125 micrograms. So I tell people, I'm like, okay, I take 0.125 milligrams of vitamin D. That's the same as 5,000. And when I tell people 5,000, I don't even finish the sentence. And they're like, oh my God, that's so much. But they don't understand what it is. So now if you look at the supplements you're buying, they're slowly starting to, now they're including both. And some of them are actually just calling it MCG now.
I've noticed
it's not even having an IU anymore, which is great.
Yeah,
which is great.
So we did make this. We try not to get into all the supplements like we talk about. We're whole food people, but we do have two. We have our brain fuel, which we'll talk about in a second, and then like the sun power. So this is a D3 and K2. So this is like at Sapien store.sapien.org. But yeah, 125 micrograms, 5,000 IU, and then you need that K2 as well.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about the K2?
Sure. So I don't think we've finished with. Did we finish with the vitamin D? Where were we?
Well, 5,000 to
5,000, and then no, you were saying
Oh,
5,000 is the
sun.
maintenance.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
so fat soluble. When someone's been deficient for a very
Yeah.
long time,
This is important.
if you need 10,000 a day for your blood level to be normal, and you start taking 10,000 a day, you're never going to get caught up because that's what you need for maintenance. So it's okay to initially, like, you take a loading dose of antibiotics, you take 2, 3, 4 right up front. You want to do loading doses of vitamin D. So you want to take high doses for a short period of time, 20,000, 30,000 a day for like a month. And they get your level checked and see what it is, and then adjust from there. But what I often hear from my patients and from people is, yeah, I was low on vitamin D. My doctor put me on 50,000 a week. I'm like, okay, and then what happened? Then my vitamin D level went up. I'm like, did you stop taking the vitamin D? And they're like, yeah.
Yep.
Every time. I'm like, you need to understand you're replacing the sun by taking the vitamin D. If you do not go in the sun, your level will crash again. Just because you took it that one time doesn't mean you're magically cured and you're okay. So it is still better to get your vitamin D from the sun, okay, without sunscreen. If you put on sunscreen, you do not make vitamin D. It blocks out the UVB rays, but lets the UVA through. Even though they say it's broad spectrum, UVA is very powerful and very strong, and a spray isn't going to stop it. So the issue with putting on sunscreen is you get lulled into a false sense of security because you're not burning, because it's blocking the B, which makes you tan and burn. So you can be in the beach for 8 hours and you're like, oh, I'm safe, I had sunscreen on. You're getting all the damaging effects of that really powerful UVA that's affecting the deeper layers of the skin. So people that always put on sunscreen when they go outside, those are the people who are going to get a melanoma. Fair skin, scared of the sun, don't get any real sun exposure. Having dark skin and having melanin protects your skin. Vitamin D reverses skin cancer. It reverses cancer. It prevents you from getting cancer. So getting safe sun exposure means go in the sun, don't put on sunscreen, but don't burn. Initially, when you're fair skin, you're going to do 10 minutes, and then 12, and then 14, and then eventually you'll get a base tan. And that's what happens naturally when you live outside. March, April, the weather starts getting warmer, the sun isn't as strong. You live outside, you're going to be outside in the weak sun, get a base tan, and then as the season goes on and the sun gets stronger, you're already tanned and protected, and you're not going to burn. It's not, I'm fair-skinned, I never go, and then I'm going to go to the beach for 8 hours.
Right.
That's not the way to do it.
And then people always ask, well, what happens when you start burning? What do I do?
Go inside.
Go inside or put on some light clothing to block yourself. Like,
So there's
it's
an
not that
initial erythema reaction to the skin, and if you really pay attention to your skin, go inside every 10 minutes, wait a few minutes for your eyes to adjust, look in the mirror. Initially, there will be a redness reaction to your skin that is not a sunburn. It will go away when you go inside and cool off. So just be careful how much you expose yourself. Don't burn. And, honestly, if you burn, it's not the end of the world, as long as you're not doing it regularly, right? So that's the vitamin D component. It's better to get it from the sun. It is different when you take a supplement. When you get it from the sun, your body makes vitamin D from sulfated cholesterol. When you take a supplement, it doesn't happen. It's different. It behaves different. So that's the vitamin D component. K2, the reason that Sapien packaged it together is because D3 and K2 go together. So D3 also regulates your calcium metabolism and allows you to absorb calcium from your diet, from your gut. So now the calcium is circulating around in your bloodstream. It's not supposed to be in your bloodstream. It's supposed to be in your bone. So what your body does is when it needs to reduce blood calcium level, it removes the calcium from the bloodstream and deposits into the bone. Your bone is like the battery. It's the storage for calcium. When your body needs to increase blood calcium level, it breaks some bone down, releases into the bloodstream. K2 is what's responsible for the calcium being removed from the bloodstream and deposit it into the bone. So if you go in the sun a lot, but you don't have a good diet, K2 can come from a proper diet. But most people, that doesn't happen. So you have to take a supplement.
So a proper diet, grass-fed, hooved animals that are consuming the green grass that we cannot digest.
Yep.
They implant that K2 into their meat, and you're supposed to eat that meat.
Yep.
You have someone who's not eating grass-fed, hooved animals, you're not absorbing enough K2. There's other sources as well, but that's ancestrally where we were getting
exactly. So that's why you need to supplement. And if you go in the sun a lot and you have calcium in your diet, but you're missing the K2, you can actually get hardened arteries. The calcium can get deposited into the arteries. You can get, so that can cause a whole host of problems. So they go together, yes.
I got to throw this in because you know how lost Western medicine is and pharmaceutical and all this stuff. So we have this negative association with calcium supplementation in the literature because they're not taking with K2.
Yep.
And so you have all this just calcium, false calcium in your body, and your body's like, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
Well, that's why it's so myopic to just give people that, that regimen you were referring to, the 50,000 units a week regimen. It's been studied, and there was all this concern about hardening the arteries, and it's if you're looking at it myopically and like, oh my God, just this one thing, like, no, you got to think about this whole system, and I think that's you've so eloquently put it together. It's all connected, right? You don't just take vitamin D, and you don't just go to the supermarket and look at the vitamin section and go, oh, I heard this was good, and then I heard that was good. Like, one of the things I really do, and I know that you do it with me when we have patients that we share, is like putting them on a regimen that makes sense for their life. So one of the things I wanted to bring up as we were talking about this is we call this sun power, right? Why do we call it sun power? Because if you're in the sun and it's making it, you don't need to take it. There's an idea there. Like, so when I talk to my patients and they're taking, I'm like, if you're out in the sun and it's a week where you're not having to go to work, and by the way, you can only make the vitamin D during a certain part of the day when the sun is above your head. Something you guys taught me, you and Joel, is if your shadow is shorter than your body, then that's a good idea that the sun is probably at the appropriate angle to make vitamin D. But that's an idea that people need to understand is like, no, I don't just like open my bottle and dump stuff in my, in my hand and like just take supplements. Like, no, like, hey, I'm going to be in the sun all day today because I'm going to go play some volleyball with my friends, or I'm going to go hang out with Gabe in his backyard and play with his kids or whatever, like that's a day I'm not taking the vitamin D. I don't need it. I don't need to just take stuff to take it. But if I'm stuck in my office seeing patients for 10 hours a day, I need to take it. And I want people to think about it in those terms of like, nothing is mindless. Be thoughtful about even something as simple as this, $20 supplement. This is a medicine when used thoughtfully. Or it's bullshit if you're just popping it and moving on with your day. You got to really think about what you're doing.
Yep.
I have one more thing because I always like to talk about my vitamin D routine. And I hope everyone can figure out a way to do it. Because I know everyone has different lifestyles and live in different parts of the world. But I am out there every day of the week around noon. I know that between 10 and 2 is usually the best time. And I'm out there, shirt off, shorts on, getting full sun on my front, full sun on my back, 20 minutes each. I read, listen to audiobooks, listen to podcasts. It's part of my day. It's built into my day. It's part of my lunch break. I can eat lunch in 20 minutes and then do the 40 minutes of sun, and that's an hour. So people need to have an hour of their day left for this type of thing.
And importantly, don't you feel awesome after you do that?
Absolutely. We had a good friend, Alex, from UCLA. We told him two things, basically. We told him simple Sapien diet recommendations. He's actually doing 1 meal a day, eating the Sapien foods, and get out in the sun. He watched the D is for Debacle, the Ivor Cummins video. Great presentation. Everyone should watch it.
Yep.
D is for Debacle, Ivor Cummins. He did that, I think it was 8 months during the COVID lockdown. He started in July. Different person, lost, 50 pounds, feels amazing, never got sick, never has anything as these young kids. He used to get sick all the time, zero sickness. His whole life changed, and all he did was go out in the sun and start eating a little differently.
Yeah. It's powerful. That should tell you something. When you go outside and you get sun and you feel good,
Yeah.
for a reason. Your physiology is working the way it should. That should give you a clue. Hey, maybe I should do more of this. It feels good.
It's so interesting. Like, your body tells you what it wants, right?
Yep.
You go out in the sun and it feels good. You skip a couple meals and you're firing in all cylinders,
Yep.
and you're like sharp. And
Eat
we're
some carbs and then you feel like
and you feel like shit. And it's like your body's telling you, and all the programming we have from the food industry and the health industry and the pharmaceutical industry is the opposite. Be afraid of the sun. You got to eat frequently. Make sure you have those carbs or you're going to drop your blood glucose. Fasting is dangerous. Like, it's toxic. The recommendations are toxic, and it's why we will continue to make this podcast, continue to just say the same shit over and over again until, because we're fighting a really, really poisonous environment, and it is free, basically free to do all the stuff we're talking about. Like, that's the trick of all of this, is that you don't have to buy super expensive supplements. The stuff we're providing people, it's inexpensive, it's affordable, it's simple. It's not about complicated. It's not about crazy, meal plans and all this, just making it feel like you're getting all. You don't need a bunch of stuff. You just need to go back to your roots and be thoughtful about what you do every day.
a lot of disease is environmental, so you just have to change what you do. It's not that complicated. It's just the issue is people believe they're physicians and they believe poor information.
And the physicians believe
What they're taught.
science,
Yeah.
evidence-based medicine that's biased,
Yep.
or they believe that information that existed before the time of evidence-based medicine is bunk, which is insane to think that, because we did pretty damn good as a species.
Did a lot better before.
Like a lot better.
Very long time.
We also, and it's most shocking right now during the pandemic, we have forgotten history. We love to forget what happened in the past and forget that these things are repeating, and that, the political stuff we're seeing right now, we've seen this before in history over and over again. The health stuff that we're seeing, we can solve it by looking back at our past because we had it figured out. Again, there was a brilliant man who was a dentist 100 years ago who wrote a book that explained everything that we're talking about. Me and Brian didn't make anything up. Dr. Gabe didn't make this stuff up. Like, we're just, like you said at the start of the podcast, opening our mind and saying, hey, let's use all the beautiful information we learned from our academics. You're an engineer, dentist, doctor. We learned a bunch of great stuff. It's not like all the education we have was meaningless. No. It was very, very powerful. But it's about integrating it with the history of humanity. I mean, I hate to use just like the term Eastern medicine or ancestral medicine, because it's everything. It's everything. It's also spiritual medicine, which is, my body tells me I feel good in the sun. I'm going to go out in the sun. My body's telling me I'm burning. I'm going to get out of the sun. I feel really good when I'm fasting. My body's telling me spiritually that it's good to heal. I can now explain it through, autophagy and all these different mechanisms, and that's beautiful. And, I'm constantly working on my mechanisms, and that's why we have Gabe on here to explain mechanisms of action, because people love that. But you don't need all that. You need to just realize that we are being screwed with, and I'm just going to say, we are being screwed with when it comes to our health by big corporations. And that goes from the bottom, where you have the layman being taught that orange juice is good in the morning, to the doctor that's being taught that you got to take a statin if your LDL's above a certain number. That stuff is nonsense, and it's a manipulation. Sorry, I got fired.
Oh, I love it. We got a Dr. Gary rant here, and it's not even a Dr. Gary rant episode. We got a freebie. Okay, we need some good tips from Dr. Gabe here. So you were talking about a lot about microbiome stuff. It sounds like the very basic layer of this is the microbiome, and living ancestrally would help that. But just in general, maybe you could give us some tips, maybe even some stuff like go get a sleep test or something. But what would you say as a dentist, or even beyond dentistry, but what can people do?
Well, that's quite a
loaded question.
Quite a question there, but
We'll start with some simple stuff, or and work your way up.
okay. So number one, I would say one of the easiest, free, most important things you can do is just go in the sun. And like I said, safe sun exposure, don't burn. You can increase your exposure. It's really, 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 really important for your health going in the sun. That's number one. Eat well. Number two, eat good meat. Eat grass-fed. Nose to tail. Brian has a great company, makes really great stuff. It's key, like we talked about, some of these, getting vitamin D from your food, having organ meats inside your food, what you eat. So eating an ancestral diet, eating a sapien diet, obviously. Now, there are some other things such as sulfur, such as magnesium, that really challenging to find. It used to come from mostly eating vegetables, and because of modern farming, unless you have your own soil that you put your own minerals in, you grow your own vegetables, it is really challenging to get proper magnesium and sulfur from eating. So you kind of have to supplement. It's always best to do things naturally, going in the sun versus taking a vitamin D supplement. But when it comes to magnesium is really important for heart health. Magnesium is a cofactor for ATP to be for ATP to be able to give off energy. So people get cramps, things like that. Athletes, magnesium is very important for muscle function and for health in general. Sulfur is also the second most abundant mineral in the body, next to calcium. Sulfur is also very important for lots of functions. So there are some supplements that are kind of important because it's challenging to eat in a way in reality. Like you said, we strive for these ideal ways of life, and at times it's easily attained. You feel good, you're doing these things, and then life happens, and you fall off track. So supplements definitely have their place. If you feel like you have issues with your sleep, get some help. Whether it's from me, whether it's from somebody, get a sleep test. That's like, I think part of a checkup with your physician should involve a sleep test. I can usually tell just from experience, questionnaires, things like that. I can usually tell when someone has issues with their sleep. But even then, people are very resistant because unless you have a spouse or a bed partner that tells you certain things, you don't know. You're asleep. How would you know that your sleep is broken unless you feel like complete shit in the morning? How would you know?
Yeah.
And if we're talking about, ideal health, I'm not talking about not being sick and not having to take medication. We're talking about, I've been doing some NAD supplementation with Gary, and man, like I feel so different than I've ever felt. And NAD basically regenerates your mitochondria, which make the fuel for every single cell in your body. So without mitochondrial health, you really just don't.
And really, everything is mitochondria. You are
everything.
your mitochondrial health. Your health is the health of your mitochondria.
So, so we're talking about really optimizing your health, yeah.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, those are simple things. I think that just to add to it is my experience is that most people don't want to even open their mind to the fact that they have a sleep problem. Yeah. And I was one of them. And again, it's, problem's a relative term. It's like if you're talking about health optimization and being the healthiest person you can, you got to open your mind to like, hey, maybe this is something that I could do better. And again, I think in our space, in our community, everyone's really obsessed with Oura rings and monitorings. Yeah. I think you can also just try stuff like what you're suggesting. I also like to add to the supplementation and sort of to the lifestyle, that ideas of a really healthy night routine and a really thoughtful morning routine. And we won't get into it today, but melatonin is so important for sleep, and the appropriate sun exposure, the appropriate lack of blue light exposure before bed. So all these things play a role. We wanted to focus today on dental health and vitamin D and stuff, but it's like this, it's this holistic approach, and I think that most of my patients that I see, and I suspect a sleep issue, they're so resistant.
Yeah.
Yes, and it often takes, so a lot of the people that end up going to you for referrals, it takes multiple visits when I'm like, you have resistant to treat hypertension. You're not obese. You're eating a sapient diet. Something's going on. Like, let's go get your sleep study, because I bet it's sleep apnea, right? Or you can't seem to lose that last little bit of weight and you're irritable. Maybe it's your sleep. Let's go see Dr. Gabe. And it's not like they're open. Like, people nowadays are open to a low carb diet, right? They're open to fasting because it's sexy. But sleep management and seeing a dentist for sleep, even though I think that's a great place to start rather than going to a CPAP specialist,
Well, this will be great. You can just have people listen to this podcast.
That's what this is
as a
about.
standard, and it's the reason it's one of those things is because you're asleep. You don't know.
Yeah.
And it's like almost like an insult when somebody tells you, "Hey, maybe your sleep is broken." What? I sleep fine.
It really is.
And people just take it so personal. And if you and I kind of understand, but really, us as doctors, we have to be open. If we just did the same thing that's accepted everywhere, you wouldn't be getting better treatment. You wouldn't be getting better health. We as humans, we have to be open to new ideas and new things. Otherwise, you're just going to be doing the same thing day in and day out. So if taking a home sleep test that's not invasive, that's very easy, can improve your overall health, everybody should take one.
And it's cheap.
Just as a side note, all humans are predisposed to sleep apnea because we walk upright. So when you look at an animal that walks on all fours, the breathing tube from the nose to the lung is a straight tube. Because we walk upright, there's a 90-degree bend in your throat. So all humans are predisposed to having apnea. Most people have vitamin D deficiency. Put those two together, it's just, there you go. The recipe for disaster as you get older. It's one of the most untreated, undiagnosed diseases and illnesses there is. And, a lot of dentists, so people listening from far away, a lot of dentists have education in sleep. And you're honestly probably better off seeing a dentist. You can see an ENT. You're honestly probably better off seeing an educated and a trained dentist to get your sleep under control.
And one other thing I would add to why I think there's such a bias against accepting that you have a sleep issue of some sort is because I think the idea of a person with a sleep problem is that concept of the Pickwickian syndrome, the morbidly obese person who's like passing out in their own fat. That's not the way a lot of the sleep apnea presents. Yeah,
it's not.
And that's what I think.
It's not the way it presents most of
the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it goes so underdiagnosed and undertreated. Is even in my education, it was Pickwickian syndrome, obstructive, and then there's some education about central sleep apnea, where like what you're talking about, where the brain actually doesn't let you sleep, and we talk about that, but we don't talk about this again, integrative approach, nutritional approach, hormonal concepts that are driving all this, and again, just like so many things in health, nothing is one thing. It is this combination of factors that makes you sleep well, and it's important to understand that, and it's important to work with someone like yourself who understands all the different levels of it, so you're not just going, you have sleep apnea, here's surgery, or here's a CPAP. It cannot be like A or B. It can't be that black and white. It has to be thoughtful, and I think that's what you bring to the table. And I've had so many patients come back to me and be like, "Oh my God, thank you so much for sending me to Dr. Gabe," and it's been such a pleasure to work with you on that level.
You as well.
This is such a good podcast for me, and I think it's great because we had a dentist on and did not talk about brushing your teeth or flossing, which are super important and you should do. But I think it goes to show the real important interventions are everything we talked about, and it starts way earlier. And I like to tell my little story of my own cavities and tooth health. I grew up with no cavities. I had a decent diet, and then I went to college and ate bad food and didn't, I always brushed my teeth twice a day my entire life. Nothing changed. Only time I've ever got cavities my whole life was from 18 to 23. Then I left college, started cooking for myself, had somewhat of an idea of what to do. Everything changed. Amazing. No cavities ever again. And so I just think that's important for people to know. Of course, it's good. Of course, brush your teeth. Of course, floss. But we sat here for an hour with a dentist and didn't talk about it because there's so many more.
Everybody knows all that stuff. It's been done to death. Everybody knows you should brush and floss, and people don't. Maybe they have sleep apnea and too tired. That happens all the time. I can't tell you how many patients tell me that. I meant to brush and floss, but then I passed out on the couch, or they fall asleep because
the underlying problem. It's always the root cause
is
the gut microbiome, the vitamin D, all these things. So awesome. Again, thank you for helping me out as well. I just got a sleep test from you, and we're doing some things, and I'm seeing some great results already.
And as we're kind of wrapping up here, I just want to say that my voice is hoarse and I have a bit of a cough because I got married recently, and it was very festive and fun, and I yelled and exerted myself, so I'm okay. Another funny update as we're wrapping up. We actually recorded this podcast maybe about a month or two ago, and it was awesome. And thank you so much for coming back, Dr. Gabe, to rehash all this stuff. We had a technical issue and we lost all the audio, and we're really grateful for you coming back and sharing all this again.
It actually turned out completely different this time than last time.
Yeah.
We talked about completely different stuff, but I think it's better. We did more of a general overview this time.
Yeah.
And then we can, meet at a future date, get into more technical detail.
Another thing that's different today, I don't know about you guys, but I took my brain fuel today, and I am sharp as a tack.
Nice.
Brain fuel.
Mine's at the office. It's great. Yeah, I've been using it this week. I got it last week, and yeah, it's better than a cup of coffee.
It's notable, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's great.
It's actually our first supplement. We mentioned SunPower. SunPower is a basic vitamin D K2 supplement. We're really proud of that. But the brain fuel is something we worked on with Nisim, who was in another podcast of ours. He's like an Ayurvedic doctor and natural healer, and it's a lion's mane, L-theanine-based nootropic, and it's really, really powerful. It has a variety of other ingredients. A lot of them are wild-crafted. Nisim goes to these farms and finds them in the wild, and we're really, really proud of it, having awesome results, and I just like to share that with everyone because we worked really hard on that one.
Yeah, store.sapien.org. You can find our program there.
Nose to tail. I order from Brian's company on a regular basis. You already mentioned it, Dr. Gabe. Yep. We'll mention the Primal Light since we talked about how important organ meat is. We have a product with ground muscle meat and organ meat mixed together. It makes for a really bomb burger. I make it all the time. I love it. Dr. Gabe, where can people find you? I'm sure they're just sitting here waiting. Guys, shut up. Tell us how we can connect with Dr. Gabe.
My website's modernamericandentistry.com, on Instagram, la.dentist.
I love it.
Nice, yeah. We'll link to that and see Dr. Gabe. He's up in the valley.
Yeah, right next to Gary.
Yep.
Literally a stone's throw.
Yeah, Woodland Hills.
Yeah.
So we'll do this again sometime soon.
Yeah,
but thank you so much, Dr. Gabe. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.